huge welcome to the UCD Institute for Discovery Zoom for Thought series. My name is Patricia Maguire and I am the Director of UCD Discovery. The format for our UCD Zoom for Thought series is that each speaker and I will have a 5-minute chat and then we will open it up to the floor for questions. So please do remember to submit your questions via the chat function that you'll find at the bottom of your screens. Today, I have the great pleasure and honour of speaking with Professor Orla Feely. And Orla is the Vice President for Research, Innovation and Impact, and also Professor of Electronic Engineering at UCD. And today, we will chat about COVID-19, an extraordinary time for research. Hi, Orla, how are you doing today?
Hi, Patricia, I'm well. I hope you are too.
Absolutely great, thanks, and a pleasure to have you here. And first question for you today, Orla, as always, is where are you located and what's been keeping you going over the last few months?
Well, I'm at home, as I have been throughout most of the past year and a bit. And what's been keeping me going, maybe the thing that I'll single out because I don't get to talk about it nearly enough, is my sons, who've been just amazing. You know, they're in their mid-teens, an age that I think has been really badly impacted by the pandemic, but they've been just wonderful throughout. They've been so positive and great fun to be around and great company. And, you know, Philip, my husband and I were so lucky that this didn't happen when they were little toddlers marauding around the house. I don't know how we would have coped, but instead they were old enough, they didn't need homeschooling, but still young enough to ask me questions about leaving cert maths, which I love. So that's what's keeping me going.
Fantastic, Orla. So Orla, you are Vice President for Research, Innovation and Impact at UCD. So can you please tell our audience about your role and what makes you so passionate about what you do?
Well, my role, I've the responsibility within my portfolio for all of UCD's research activities across all disciplines and all of our innovation activities. So all the way in which we bring our research out to the world through commercialization, through other forms of impact. So it's a huge portfolio and it's absolutely wonderful. You know, every day there is something new and exciting going on. If you think about all the different types of research in UCD, from the humanities through the social sciences, the sciences, medicine, engineering, and so on, there's always something really wonderful happening. I work with an amazing team, and there's such positivity, and I suppose particularly at this time, as we'll talk now, I think of the pandemic, we see what research and innovation can deliver to the world. We see why it's so important. And so how could you not be passionate about that, Patricia?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. It's just wonderful what you guys do in UCD research. So moving on to your title, Orla, can you please tell us more about this extraordinary time for research?
Well, I think at a number of levels. First of all, you know, the progress that has been made against the pandemic really is extraordinary. You know, to think a year ago, well, when this all kicked off, a disease that nobody had ever heard of, nobody knew anything about. And here we are 15 months or so on with a number of working vaccines. Now, that wasn't a given at all. You know, if you look at HIV, 40 years on, there's still not a vaccine for HIV. So it was by no means a given that there would be a single vaccine or that would have anywhere near the efficacy that we've seen. So, and that is down to science in a number of regards. First of all, coming up with the vaccines, and I was on a panel not too long ago with my counterpart from Oxford. He spoke about the decades and decades of basic research where their vaccine research was funded when it was neither popular nor profitable. So there's that basic research that led to the fundamental vaccine discovery. There's the clinical trials, a really important part of research in this area that, you know, gave us the confidence that this could be rolled out. And then, of course, there's also the scaling up and the production in large numbers of the vaccines, getting them out to society, all the logistics of that. There are research challenges at each part of that chain, and then the behavioral adoption and so on. So it's a real triumph for research. Within UCD, if I look back over the last 15 months of that, first of all, the immediate response of our researchers when the pandemic hit was to say, how can I help? To put people down at the front line, PPE down at the front line, and then to start to deliver real research solutions. So the NVRL, of course, and lots of other testing capability that came out of UCD, sequencing capability, epidemiological modeling, you know, so many different aspects, clinical trials again, you know, the fact that our researchers are involved in the top international clinical trial networks meant that we'd access to expertise and to drugs that we wouldn't otherwise have had. So all that expertise has brought about real benefits for patients. And that was all done at a time when our researchers were also pivoting all their teaching online with like zero notice. We're managing all the demands of the pandemic at home. So it really has been an extraordinary time in so many respects.
Extraordinary and completely phenomenal response by all across the board.
Yeah.
So Orla, in UCD Discovery, as you know, we are passionate about interdisciplinarity. So how important is interdisciplinarity in general to research?
Well, it's hugely important. I mean, all the big challenges that we face, and of course, the challenges when we lift our eyes past the pandemic, the challenge of sustainability, of course, is a huge challenge. The challenge of an opportunity of digitalization, these are by definition multidisciplinarity. They're so broad in their scope that no one discipline could even start to think about solving them. If I was to take one example, Patricia, and I could take so many, but since we're talking together, and work that I know you're hugely involved in, is the whole question of AI for healthcare. We have a colloquium on this later this week. Such extraordinary things happening there. Ronan Cahill's work about kind of real-time AI support for a surgeon in colorectal surgery, supporting the decision-making capability. And you've spoken about AI augmenting human intelligence, not replacing it, but augmenting it, and the many ways in which that can have huge benefits. So that's just one of so many areas, but one that I'll single out since we happen to be talking, because you've done so much work on that, and I think it's an extraordinarily exciting area.
Yeah, and if anybody, actually, any of our listeners are interested, that you can find it. It's a UCD IBM event. That's I think the details are up on Eventbrite, but we can circulate them around to our mailing list. And thank you. Okay, Orla. So we finished our initial questions, but actually, I get the opportunity to ask a question before the audience do. So I must say, last week you were inaugurated as President of Engineers Ireland. So firstly, huge congratulations on that, Orla. And maybe you can tell our audience a little bit about that.
Yes, and that's something I'm really looking forward to. My home discipline, although I talked about my involvement across all disciplines in UCD, which I love, but I have a particular draw, of course, for my home discipline of engineering, which captivated me, I suppose, as a teenager in the first instance. So Engineers Ireland, it's a great organisation. It's a membership organisation. We've got more than 25,000 membership, and we do lots of, kind of important tasks around engineering within Ireland, like accrediting courses and CPD and so on. But also we support the community of engineers and also advocate for the profession. And for me, this is a really interesting time for engineering generally and for engineering in Ireland. A lot of those big challenges that we face around a green and digital recovery, as the EU and our government and so on are all talking about, many of those challenges are really, enormously engineering challenges. So the fact that we can, bring our engineering insight to bear on these is a huge opportunity for Ireland and for the world at this time. And I'm so delighted and proud to be leading Engineers Ireland over the coming year.
Yeah, it's wonderful, Orla. Huge congratulations on that. And I'm sure our audience will have a lot of questions, which already are coming in thick and fast for you, Orla. So I'm going to try my best to get through them in our limited time. But so here's an interesting one. The pandemic has showcased the wonders of science, but also some of the limitations. What do you think may have been done better?
Communication, I think, can always be done better, when you look back. So that's the main one that occurs to me. Another one, I don't think we were awful about this, but consideration of the human dimension in all this, kind of, I suppose, maybe the behavioral science end of things, and understanding how people will adapt to new technologies and new developments in various ways. So there are a couple that spring to mind. But overwhelmingly, this has been such a positive story for science, and it's great. In our own environment as well, have we taken enough care of our own people through this really difficult time, of our students, of our researchers, of our faculty? I think we always need to ask ourselves that, because it has been such a demanding time on so many.
Great. So I'm just scan the questions, because you've probably answered about 3 of them already in your answer there. But
efficient.
So there's one here. So it's one here actually asking about your background in electronic engineering. So they're curious about your specific research area. So maybe you might like to give us some insight into that.
Yeah, my area is in nonlinear circuits and systems, and it's kind of at the border where engineering meets mathematics in many ways. So, back in the day, and, unfortunately, it's one of the few downsides of my current job. I really didn't manage to keep up my own research activity as I originally might have hoped. The current job is just so demanding, along with all my various external engagements. But many of my involvements would have been with applied mathematicians, with physicists, and that. So it's a really, for me, really interesting area to delve into some of the most complicated mathematical phenomena that happen in circuits that have really practical applications. And what is great for me about research is not just delivering research yourself, but where the people that you trained in your research group go on to. So just to take one example, my colleague Elena Blockina, who was formerly a postdoc in my research group, she subsequently got a faculty position in UCD LecEng, and she's now very much involved. She's the Chief Technology Officer for one of our most exciting startups, Equal One, in quantum computing. So, for me, that is one of the most exciting things, when you see the people that have worked with you in your research programs go on and do wonderful things themselves. Because, as individuals, we can achieve so much, but through the amplification of all our students, it's extraordinary what we can achieve.
Oh, that's a lovely story, Orla. I didn't actually know that. Congratulations on that. That's a lovely story. So here's an interesting one. Okay, I'm going to read it out verbatim. Do you find yourself ever irritated when an engineering solution seems to you to be clear, but politically infeasible or unfeasible, I suppose?
No, I don't. No, because I think that is the world in which we live. There are many things that one might, excuse me, one might want to have happen, and one might think should be possible, but we have to be pragmatic and look at the world in which we live and try to, interface with, say, the political system in the case you mentioned, or communities, or, whatever aspect of the constraints you think that you can address. But that's kind of what engineering is. Engineering is about finding solutions that work in the context of all the constraints that you have. And you can't just think dogmatically, it's just all about the engineering. It's not. It's about all the social, economic, other factors that impact on the success of the decisions that you make. So no, I don't find that frustrating. It's part of the challenge.
Okay, wow, it's a really, really good way of looking at it. Here's one. Any examples of positive new practices that we can bring forward from the pandemic within UCD?
Oh yes, that's a really interesting question, and I think the jury is still out to an extent on that, but there's an awful lot that already suggests itself. So number one, travel. When I think of some of the distances that I traveled previously to very short and sometimes unnecessary meetings, it was crazy, from a personal point of view, but also from a sustainability point of view. So I think we'll see a very, very different attitude to the way that we undertake travel. I think that home working more generally, and what that means in a research context, that's a very imminent decision that we have to make. And culturally, in terms of making sure that we take care of people, that we bear in mind the human factor in all the decisions that we make, I think that's something we'll have to take forward. But I think that's a really great question. And, when the dust settles on this a little bit, we'll have to sit down and consider that in more detail and see how we can benefit. Because I think particularly when you take the learnings and kind of map them onto our sustainability obligations, I think that there'll be really important things that we can do.
And hopefully the dust will settle soon on that, and we'll be
yes.
As back to as normal, well, as new normal as possible. So basically it's a question asking, COVID-19 researchers have been quite focused on that, but has any other research been overlooked because of this?
I think we have to be very careful that it hasn't been and that it won't be, because of course, all our other research has continued to an extraordinary extent. And, we've seen the number of publications submitted has shot up over the past year, kind of counterintuitively, the number of grants submitted. So my own team in UCD Research is doing amazing work to support all those who are putting in new grants. Now, I'm kind of concerned, and maybe this also speaks to your earlier question, I'm concerned about the gender implications of this. There are some people who seem to have just put the foot down and seem to be delivering in spades in the current circumstances. There are others, particularly with young children, and there is then that gender dimension to this, who've been really, really challenged in being able to deliver. So I think that we have to look at that very, very carefully and make sure that we don't perpetuate any of these divisions that arose during the pandemic, and not just not perpetuate them. I think that we really have to address them. So I think that's something that we have to be very cognizant of as we go forward.
That's awesome, Orla. Thank you.
And
And
but yes, in terms of all the other research, it has all been happening and it has been brilliant, and people have been working so hard. And again, we're continuing our support across all disciplines. And we are now fitting into national discussions around national research strategy, making the case for all disciplines to be funded, basic research all the way through applied research, early stage researchers, as well as the most experienced researchers, individual researchers, as well as large centres. All of them are a necessary part of our research mix.
And actually, you've just said the last question that we had for you was all about that. And so you've kind of preempted it almost, the grand challenge, like the national scene. So it's the future, I suppose, the next couple of years in terms of research in Ireland and Ireland Inc. and the future of research. Maybe you can just
and it's a really interesting time nationally because there are a few things in play. I mean, there's the general pandemic recovery, of course, so that's going to be very big on the agenda. There is the successor to Innovation 2020, which has been our strategy for research and innovation up to 2020. It should have been refreshed by now, but of course then the pandemic distracted everybody. And then there is that big new move towards grand challenge type funding with the prospect of significant European funding, particularly around green and digital challenges. So there's a load going on, a lot of kind of wheels in motion at this time. We are feeding in a lot of our thoughts. I encourage all our research community to get involved, and indeed the community more broadly, when they do really go out to the public, as they will be over the coming weeks and months, to identify challenges that capture the public imagination. We really want UCD researchers and the UCD community more broadly to be making their voice heard in that, because it could be really exciting.
Oh, it's so exciting, Orla, and what a way to finish. We are unfortunately completely out of time. So sincere apologies to all of you whose questions I didn't get to. But I just want to take this opportunity to say the absolutely biggest, hugest thank you to Orla for the most fascinating discussion today. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me, Patricia, and best of luck with the series.
Thanks so much, and thanks to everyone for joining in. Don't forget, keep your eye out on zoomforthought.ie, where you can check out our list of upcoming speakers. And thank you very much to everyone. See you next week.
And thanks for all who attended. I see some familiar faces here, and it's lovely to see you all.
I know, isn't it just lovely?
Yeah.
And everybody's waving at you, so it's lovely. Thanks a million, Orla. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.